各位委員
Members, we have a quorum and it is past the meeting time. Let me call the meeting to order. Item 1 on the agenda. Follow up on matters raised at previous meetings. The administration has already provided a response to follow-up actions arising from the discussion at meetings on the 3rd of March and the 9th of March. That's in paper CB 1668-02. Shall we ask the Deputy Secretary to take us through the paper, please? Chairman. With regard to the last meeting and the meeting before last, we have got this response paper. First of all, exempted persons. There was a view that we should keep in view the need to review the list of exempted persons. We would take on board that view. We will note it and record it. Another item that has been discussed more is the secrecy provision. Last time, some members said that some committees would be set up by the IA, and whether those committees should be stipulated in law that they should be subject of secrecy provisions. We'd like to state that in Section 53A, 1AA amended by Clause 64 will provide for the secrecy provision to be applicable to people appointed by the IA. So we don't think there should be another provision to specify that a committee set up by the IA would have to be subject to the secrecy provision. In other words, these people are already subject to the secrecy provision. Para 3 or 5, disclosure of information. At the last discussion, someone asked whether we should state in the law that when the IA has signed bilateral MOU or multilateral MOU, and only then can the IA disclose information to such parties. I'd like to point out that actually Section 53B1 of the ICO actually gives the insurance authority a discretionary power to disclose information to its counterparts overseas. So it is not an obligation as such that the IA must disclose information to overseas counterparts. And actually, internationally speaking, with regard to similar parties overseas, we have already entered into bilateral or multilateral MOUs. When an overseas jurisdiction also has in place the secrecy provisions, then the IA will be able to exercise discretionary power to exchange information that can facilitate the other party's regulatory work. And as for controller, last time there was a question about Clause 71 of the bill, which is Section 64F. And the definition of controller is such that it is set at 15% of shareholding. And someone asked how that threshold was set. In fact, we took reference from existing self-regulatory regimes, and we also used the 15% controlling stake as a threshold. And actually, in the MPFS ordinance, we also use the same threshold. But then in the SFO banking ordinance and the anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing financial institutions ordinance, the controller is defined differently in different contexts. And the controlling stake is set at 10% to 50%. We are of the view that since we already have the existing threshold at 15%, to regulate licensed insurance intermediaries in the existing ordinance, would like to keep it. From paras 9 to 12, there have been numerous discussions before, and these are about restrictions under new Section 64J and 64K. In other words, whether someone can have common personnel at insurance agent and insurance broker companies, for example, as directors. Our aim is that there should not be any conflict of interest, because we know that insurance agent and insurance brokers represent different people. And also in other jurisdictions like in the UK and Singapore, there are similar regulatory requirements, but they are not as clearly stipulated. However, the principle or criterion is such that if there are common directorships, there shouldn't be any conflict of interests. In other words, the policies are the same as Hong Kong's. I understand members concerned whether this is enforceable. We understand your worries, and we understand that members have a proposal to say whether we should set it outright that as long as you are a director of an insurance agent, then you cannot be a director of an insurance broker. But we are aware of the existing practice, so we'd like to strike a balance, and we would like to keep what is in 64J and 64K. As for the textual side, the industry has certain comments. We'll communicate with them without going against our policy of dealing with conflict of interests. We will talk to the industry, hoping to arrive at something both can accept. Next, duty to notify IIA of appointments. Members had the view last time that the law might want to stipulate that when a licensed party has already notified the appointments to the IIA, whether within a certain time we should notify the applicant. We have looked at existing practices. Yes, this is done in some legislation, but within the financial services sector and regulation, we usually make use of performance pledges. For example, the SFC and the MPFSA usually respond within 7 to 20 business days.
Our position is that upon the setting up of the IIA, there will be performance pledges made instead of stipulating the requirements in the law. Paragraph 15 deals with the validity period of the licenses issued by the IIA. We want to reiterate this point. With regard to insurance agents, their registration is for every 3 years. As for insurance brokers, there is no specified validity period. We want to stipulate in the law that the validity period of the licenses will be for 3 years, and the IAA can also determine any other period. As for paragraphs 16 and 17, there is a requirement of a responsible officer. Whether an insurance agency or an insurance broker, there must be a responsible officer who is responsible for the internal control of the company, that is to comply with the law. And if there is no RO in a agency or in a broker, then the license can be suspended. The suspension is within a certain period. A discretion is given to the IIA. The period can be specified, or the period or the suspension will hinge on the occurrence of an event. Now, some members of the view that until the occurrence of an event is rather ambiguous, and therefore it should better be specified. Now, the law requires the presence of a responsible officer, and we expect that in reality there may be many factors leading to the absence of a responsible officer. And we therefore want to give the discretion to the IIA. We've checked the laws in Hong Kong, and there are similar provisions in these laws. We therefore propose to retain this wording. There is a minor drafting issue is in respect of Section 64, and we are going to move a CSA. Thank you. We're happy to take questions. Any questions from members? If not, then we go back to clause-by-clause study of the bill. With regard to paragraphs 13 and 14, the IIA will set out its performance pledges on the processing time for each type of appointments and its guidelines. And in paragraph 14, you set out the performance pledges of some regulatory bodies, and the period varies from 7 to the organization, or rather, the 3 self-regulatory organizations range from 3 to 10 business days. Why you make a reference to 7 and 20 business days? Well, Chairman, we do not say that the pledge will be from 7 to 20 days, business days rather. We just say that the SFO and the MPFO, or rather, the SFC and the MPFA have performance pledges varying from 7 to 20 business days. Then my follow-up question is, do you have a preliminary estimate in respect of the possible performance pledges? How many days will they be? Will they be 3 days, or how many? Maybe the Commissioner can explain why we will have different pledges, because there are different types of work. The Commissioner, with regard to the 3 regulatory organizations, the pledges range from 3 to 10 business days, because they are not regulatory authorities. In respect of our exchange of information or clarification of information with overseas authorities, we may need more time. And at present, the 3 self-regulatory organizations are not able to do this. Other regulatory authorities overseas, because of confidentiality, will not provide such information to the self-regulatory organizations. The vetting the self-regulatory organizations can do is rather limited. What they do is just documentary work. Say if a certain responsible person of an intermediary is problematic, then we will have to step in and obtain information from our overseas counterparts. Therefore, the work they do, the self-regulatory organizations, is rather limited. So the time required is, or the pledge is only 3 to 10 days. But if there is a need to inquire about certain things with overseas regulatory authorities, time required will be longer. The SFO, the SFC, and the MPFA have pledges ranging from 7 to 20 days. In the future, the IIA may require similar time. It depends on whether the person is a local person or is an expatriate, and whether we need more information about his background, his track record, his past history, his history. Therefore, we may need more time to contact other overseas regulatory authorities. As for the, I think the difference is in terms of nature, power, and procedures. If there is no further question, then we will move on to clause-by-clause study of the bill. We should start from clause 71 of the bill. Yes, Ms. Ho. Now, we are now at section 60 or 70. Clause 71. Some The administration will move CSAs, some as for some, they will draft guidelines. So I just hope that there can be a table to outline what will be amended and what will be dealt with by guidelines. What are the undertakings of the administration? Okay, please give us a summary. Put it in a table, please. After we have finished with these 3 volumes, then we will go back. Okay, this is a suggestion from a member. We should start from clause 71 of the bill, which deals with 64ZO, section 64ZO, which is page 213 of the English version CB1 1636 1314 bracket 01. The administration has provided a clause-by-clause study index CB1 369 1415 bracket 03, listing the relevant policy issues to facilitate members' study of the bill. Let us therefore move on to 64ZO, section 64ZO. Who will lead us? Sorry, speaker is not coming through. Yes, page 213. 64ZO is related to 64ZN. In fact, the structure is the same. 64ZO is about licensed insurance broker companies without responsible officers. If they don't have a responsible officer, then the license can be suspended. As for the insurance broker companies, within 90 days after the date on which the suspension takes effect, and if there is no further application, then the license can be revoked. We move on to 64. New 64 is set P. A license is revoked on death for individuals. If it is for a business entity, then it will be upon the dissolution of the partnership or company. 64 is set Q. The license can be revoked or suspended on license insurance intermediaries request. 64 is set R, page 215. If the license is suspended, the intermediary is deemed to be holding the license and has to comply with the provisions. And then is set 64 is set S. Revocation of suspension of license does not avoid or affect any agreement. The new 64 is set T. Provides that if the license of a person is revoked or suspended, the authority may require the person to transfer a license, may transfer to a client a copy of the record. I think for 64 is set as, say if a license is suspended, the agreement will not be affected. So does it mean that even if the license is revoked, it can still continue to do business? Yes, Chairman. Yes, let me give you an example. Now, an insurance policy is an agreement. Now, if the license has been suspended, then the licensee or the intermediary may still have other contracts with its counterparts, and such contracts will have to be observed, or such agreements will have to be observed. Say, for example, it may have a. It seems that his mic is not on. Chairman, let me explain it further. Say, for any business entity, if its license has been suspended or revoked, it can still operate, and it can still have to complete the contracts or agreements with its service providers. Say, for example, an ISP. It cannot be a reason for not honoring the contract. I understand the point. It can be done before the suspension revocation. Now it says that if license of a person is suspended under this subdivision, the person must, during the suspension period, continue to be regarded for purpose of this, or rather, does not avoid or affect an agreement, transaction, or arrangement entered into by the person, regardless whether the agreement, transaction was entered into or arranged before or after the revocation. Now you have a license, then you can conduct the regulated activities. During suspension, the licensee cannot continue with its regulated activities. Yet, there may be other business agreements or contracts which it has to honor. It doesn't mean that it can continue to regulated business or to continue to be an insurance intermediary. It cannot engage in insurance intermediary businesses. Is there any loophole? You suspend a license, but it doesn't affect his agreement. Even after the revocation or suspension. After suspension, then if he sells insurance contracts and insurance policies and is selling without a license, selling insurance without a license, and that's wrong. There must be a consistent arrangement. This provision is similar to that of the SFO or the MPFO in respect of the revocation and suspension of licenses.
But I may find this a little strange if I look at it as a layman, because the SFC and the MPFSO, well, I think not any of the members present have taken part in the scrutiny of those bills. As far as I understand, the service contract is such that there should be two parties to it, the one providing the service and the one accepting the service. Like telecommunications operator, if they provide service at an insurance company, then if their license is rescinded, it still doesn't mean that the telecommunications contracts will be invalid. However, if they provide service to other people, if they are responsible for a policy, and the policies entered into before the revocation of the license can still be valid. Is that right? Chairman, let me put it this way. Whenever a license is revoked, during the revocation period, there cannot be the conduct of any insurance intermediary activities. Are you talking about old or new activities? Let me put it this way. The policies are an agreement between the insurance company and the policyholder. The intermediary would have been appointed by the insurance company to be its representative. But we are talking about it being a business entity. If he has entered into, say, a tenancy agreement with another party for 3 years, he cannot say that because my license is suspended or revoked, the tenancy agreement will become invalid as well. That will not be the case. This is what it means. And in terms of regulated activities, Mr. Chairman, you were talking about telecommunications activities, because any business entities would have other contracts. So are you talking about contracts or agreements which are not insurance agreements? Well, that I can understand. But I think you have to put it in clearer terms. What would happen to the insurance policies? Yes, we will look at it again to see whether the text has to be improved. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, speaker not coming through. 64ZU. It's about permission to carry on business operations on revocation or suspension of license if that's for the purpose of closing down the business. And if it is suspension, the authority may permit the person to carry on only essential business operations for the protection of the interests of policyholders. Any other questions? If not, page 217, 64ZV and also 64ZY. This is about renewal of licenses. It's stipulated here that at renewal, the IA will have to consider subclauses 5 to 8, like 5B, like at the issue of the license, the IA would have to see whether that person is a fit and proper person. And then 5D, it has to be satisfied that there is a responsible officer if we are talking about a business entity. And then 8E, on page 220, it stipulates that the broker company applicant, the considerations are as follows, that if the license is renewed, the company can continue to comply with the capital requirements and also the keeping of accounts. If there are no questions, let's go to the next page, clause 64ZW. This is about amendment, revocation, and imposition of conditions on renewal of licenses. Next, 64ZX on page 222. These two are about the validity of licenses, and usually the renewal will be for 3 years. And then 64ZZ, it stipulates that the person applying for the license should provide to the authority the information required. And then 64ZZA on page 223, determination of fit and proper. This clause stipulates that in determining whether a person is a fit and proper person, the authority must have regard to the following matters, including 1A, the education or other qualifications, B, the person's ability, and C, reputation, integrity, financial status, and E, whether any disciplinary action has been taken against the person, particularly in terms of compliance and particularly records at financial and securities bodies. Mr. Ng Leung Sing. On 64ZZA, determination of fit and proper, 1. You mentioned at E, it says whether any disciplinary action has been taken against the person by a few authorities, which are regulatory in nature. I'd like to ask, what about professional bodies, which can also take disciplinary actions against its members because they practice self-regulation, like the Hong Kong Institute of Public Accountants, Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Public Accountants, and how their decisions can be related to these regulatory bodies for reference. DS, thank you for that question. Yes. If I may look at 64ZZA1, bracket 4, Roman 4, this is exactly what this member is asking. It says here, any other authority or regulatory organization, whether in Hong Kong or elsewhere, which, in the authority's opinion, performs a function similar to those of the authority. This is the most important part, that in the authority's opinion, these bodies perform a function similar to those of the authority. In other words, if there are other authorities that have taken or have taken disciplinary action, the IA can use that as reference. But of course, it has to see whether there is a relation between the matters. Well, after the law is made, I believe you might like to write some guidelines for the other authorities. Otherwise, the professional bodies don't know how they can connect with you. They may take disciplinary decisions. They don't know how they can be supplied to you. Should it be for the chairman of someone with legal status who can channel the information to you? Because in terms of disciplinary action, it can mean different things. So can you not entrench this with a legal basis? DS, could I ask Mr. Ng's view? Is it that are you talking about communication between regulatory bodies? If you just say the Hong Kong ICPA will just have to inform you of a disciplinary decision, does it mean that can take care of what you require here under the law? Is it that so that the Hong Kong MA and the SFC can already act upon it? Or do you need a solid or firm adjudication before you can do anything to the party who is disciplined? DS, well, what I understand Mr. Ng to be asking is, say for example, there are 3 self-regulatory bodies in the insurance industry. Later on, when the IIA is set up, everybody would follow the laws attending to the IIA. But if the 3 self-regulatory bodies in the industry do not have any more legal status in terms of licensing, etc., if the industry takes disciplinary action, will the IIA also follow up on such disciplinary action taken within the industry in order to enforce the law? Mr. Ng mentioned the Hong Kong ICPA. I understand that the practice certificates are issued by the Hong Kong ICPA, and the same can be said about the Bar Association, Law Society, and the Medical Council. What about the IA? Before it is set up, the government does not license insurance brokers or insurance agents. Rather, this is done by the 3 regulatory bodies within the industry itself. Compared to the Hong Kong Medical Council, the Hong Kong ICPA, and the Bar Association and the Law Society, I think what is being done is different from those regimes. The DS mentioned 64 ZZA E Roman 4. You mentioned Hong Kong or elsewhere, which performs a function similar to those of the authority. And if any decisions or adjudications are taken by them, the Hong Kong IA will consider making the same kind of regulatory decisions. Is that the case? And you are not really talking about chambers of commerce or other civic bodies making a decision. Is that right? Is our understanding correct? Chairman, within the finance sector, I think the bodies that are most relevant are those mentioned under E. But if Mr. Ng is talking about professional bodies, if we have reason to inquire into such matters, we will liaise with the relevant professional bodies. to see whether a certain party has a certain record. If that information is in the public domain, then yes, it is already public, but if not, we would still like to inquire into this person's professional record in a confidential manner. Under 64 ZZA 1C, we talk about the reputation, character, reliability, and integrity of the person. We may contact enforcement agencies and relevant professional bodies to inquire about this point. Okay, let us be more specific. Don't be so academic. Let me give you an example. The China Securities Regulatory Commission, for example, it disciplines a certain insurance company. Will the Hong Kong IA do something in response? Well, this will certainly be netted under 1E Roman 4 because we have entered into a bilateral MOU with the CSRC. Okay. What about the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers? It is issuing licenses to which one? The Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. No, they are not issuing licenses. You are talking about agents. Well, the three self-regulatory bodies, if they have been doing that already, they will stay during the transitional period. No, after the IA is set up and the transition is over. By that time, if the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers takes certain measures and makes certain decisions, will the IA act in response? Because here you say take any regulatory action. Will you do that? You won't, right? You will just investigate into the matter and come up with another disciplinary action. Is that right? Well, if you are talking about some disciplinary actions already taken and whether we will do anything about it, well, in the transitional clauses, we will state what will happen to such disciplinary actions. But here we are talking about the determination of fit and proper, and we will consider what the three regulatory bodies have already done. And we will use that as reference to determine whether someone is fit and proper.
I'm not talking about in the past. I'm talking about the future. After the transition, the IIA is up and running. By then, if the HKFI takes certain disciplinary action against its members, then will the IIA act like working with the Chinese Insurance Authority? Sorry, speaker is not coming through. The Federation has no power to discipline its members, but judgment by the three regulatory, self-regulatory bodies will be kept by the IIA, and that will be for reference. I want to ask this. Now, there are three trade associations in the insurance industry, right? Any one insurance company can be a member of any of the three, one of the three. There is only one federation, and the intermediaries join other two. Say, suppose I am dismissed by one association. Will the two also make reference and decide to revoke my membership? It depends on what you have done. If it wants to join the certain association, and if his membership had been revoked by other organizations, then that will be a reference. Say, for example, if the IAIA is aware that my membership has been revoked by a certain trade association, then will the IIA therefore take relevant similar action? In the future, the three so-called self-regulatory bodies will become trade associations. All powers are vested with the government. My question for the administration is whether the IIA will do that following the revocation of membership by the trade associations. Will the decisions of the trade associations will be similar to that of other regulatory authorities overseas? Any decisions made by the self-regulatory bodies will be taken into account by the IIA. I'm not talking about the future. After the transition, when the IIA is up and running, the IIA will take into account any such judgments. The judgments were not made in the past. The judgments will be made or are made by the trade associations in the future. In the future, the three self-regulatory bodies cannot make any judgment. They have no power. They have no power to make decisions affecting the license. But membership, what about decisions on membership? Decisions on membership. Say, for example, they take action and revoke the membership of a particular member. Will you then take into account of this decision and then make a decision against the license? Now, if it is about membership, say if a member has been dismissed, then you can take away his license. Well, it depends on the grounds for dismissal. Say, for example, if it's about integrity or a membership fee in arrears over many years, then this will be the circumstances taken into account by the IIA, whether this is a fit and proper person. That will affect whether that will affect his reputation or integrity. Now you will consider these conditions, but you will not simply take action because the trade association has already revoked the membership. But if a decision has been made by, say, the Chinese Insurance Authority, then the Hong Kong IIA will take similar action. Well, we will take related action depending on whether it is the same person, whether it is company policy or what. Yes, if I may follow up. E4. Any other authority or regulatory organization, whether in Hong Kong or elsewhere, which in the authority's opinion performs functions similar to those of the authority. The professional body has to uphold the reputation of the profession in society. It is not performing the function of the insurance authority. If the professional organizations insurance, or rather professional institutions' decision will affect the integrity or reputation, then it may not be exercising a function similar to that of the IIA. The professional bodies are not biased. They uphold certain standards. Will you just limit your consideration to the area of character or reputation or integrity? I hope you can clarify this. Now concerning bracket 3, any other matters considered by the authority to be relevant? Well, that covers a very broad area. It nearly covers everything. I think it is too broad. I want to ask about 1D and 1E. D is the person's financial status or solvency. So the applicant has to provide the financial information on financial status. Does it include the liability? Say the person may have a lot of cash, but if the liability is very big in comparison with available liquidity, available liquid assets, will that be taken into account? You say that there is no need for that person to declare. You also consider the declaration or the information provided by other parties. So where do you get the information? Will you conduct a check which is even more severe than the integrity check of civil servants? Now, that of course is a matter of public interest as far as the insurance institution is concerned, but what sort of procedures will you take to obtain information in your integrity check? Under 1E, you refer to 3 regulatory bodies in Hong Kong. With regard to disciplinary action, will that decision on disciplinary action last for life, or will that be spent after a certain period of time? As for 64 ZZA, Ms. Ho referred to 1D, the person's financial status or solvency. We're talking about the regulation of intermediaries. The intermediary should have a sound financial status. It should not be at the risk of bankruptcy. There are similar regulations under the present self-regulatory regime. That's also under the fit and proper clause. Will the IIA be checking the person for all the time? I think we adopt a reasonable approach. We have studied certain provisions. The IIA does have power of inspection. Basing on regulatory checks or regular checks, information will be obtained with regard to the financial status of the intermediary. Would you look into the liabilities or the relevant liability ratios, to put it simply? Now, concerning financial status, there is the issue of solvency or being insolvent. Now, you may have a huge amount of cash in hand, but your liabilities are much, much bigger. And you can have a lot of assets, but you don't have much liquidity, and you become illiquid. So when there are financial difficulties, it can be all sorts of scenarios. I can have a lot of assets, but they are fixed assets, and I can't handle a big claim under which I have to pay a lot of pay out a lot. That's the problem of liquidity. It is really not adequate concerning your bankruptcy example. For intermediaries, they are different. For insurance companies or the insurers, we have capital requirement and also solvency requirements. That's for the insurer. As for the intermediaries, agents and brokers, they have different terms. They have different terms and conditions. They have capital of no less than $100,000. They are intermediaries. They are not to deal with solvency or the ability to pay. We require them a sound financial status, but we don't have very strict asset and liability ratios. Well, I've forgotten that it is on intermediaries rather than on the insurance company or the insurer. Mr. Yu, there are still several outstanding questions I've asked concerning disciplinary action. I may not have fully remembered the questions. The MPFA keeps a record of 5 years. I can clarify that in writing. I cannot recall how long do they keep the record. As for the MPFA, they do keep records over several years. I don't know the MA. Chairman, if it is to regulate the intermediaries, it can be a little bit less strict. But you do need to consider whether any disciplinary action taken by any one of the three will require you to take similar actions. Or if the in some organization, in some regulatory bodies, the record is kept for life, and in some, the record may be spent after several years. How they manage the record of disciplinary action is the point. Why for this action they keep it for life? Say for SFC, they deal with the security intermediaries. Will that regulatory arrangement be applicable to insurance intermediaries as well? It may be so, but you need to explain why you adopt the standards of these three regulatory bodies. I think you need to understand the situation of these three regulatory bodies, because you say that you don't have any information at hand. Next time, please provide a written answer. And also, please, in your paper, address a question asked by Ms. Ho. There are three different standards here. Yes, I will produce a paper on that. Chairman, we are not going to adopt three different standards to deal with the regulation of insurance intermediaries.
What we are talking about is when we determine fit and proper persons, we are talking about three things: integrity, qualifications, and financial status. Those are the three that we really want to talk about. Some people may get also a license from other licensing authorities. And if he has an integrity problem, then the IIA has the responsibility to look into that. That's the spirit of the law. As to the detailed arrangements, even now, the IA has very close liaison with the other two regulatory bodies, and I can explain that in detail in a paper. Mr. Yu Siwing. Sorry, Chairman, I was out of the room just now on some business. I don't know whether the question has been asked. I'd like to talk about travel agents. The financial status is regulated in such a way that the authority will issue a financial report annually. If a travel agency is found to have a problem, then the report will not be made annually but quarterly or even half-yearly. And if there is a big problem, there would be the requirement for a monthly report. In other words, if it is found that a company is already in financial difficulty, well, if that is hinted in the financial reports, then the audited reports might have to be submitted in a more frequent manner. I don't know whether that can be considered by the IIA. I will answer that question. Mr. Yu, thank you for the question. What is done now and also in future, it is like this. With regard to insurance companies, we will be watching their financial status very closely. And their financial accounts have to be submitted to the IA at regular intervals, not just on an annual basis. but that has to be done quarterly. If we should spot any problems, if we are worried that something may happen, we can ask for more frequent submission of reports, as Mr. Yu said. But what we are talking about here is really about intermediaries and the considerations for licensing intermediaries, and we are talking about individuals. The important thing is whether the responsible officer is a fit and proper person. And we are really talking about the financial status of that person. As the DS was explaining, we will look at previous bankruptcy records, and we might get information from the market that this person is heavily in debt. We will look at all these to see whether he is a fit and proper person to be the responsible officer at an intermediary. These are different considerations. Well, Mr. Yu, there are two levels. This one is about intermediaries, and we have not got to the insurance companies. I was talking about the authority licensing travel agents. I think they are not the same as insurance companies, but some travel agencies can be as big as having 1,000 people working in it, and then some others are so small they have only 2 staff members, and they are the agents for hotels and for airlines, and they do not have their own products. Therefore, to a certain extent, they are also intermediaries. When the trade regulates travel agents, we make use of this set of guidelines, and the advantage is travel agents will not be able to tout for business and then abscond. Now, whether this would happen with insurance companies, say the intermediaries will accept a lot of money in the name of a big company, and then the intermediary absconds, then who would be responsible for the compensation? Let me add, as Mr. Yu was saying, if the intermediary is a broker company, it also has to submit regular annual accounts, because we have the minimum capital requirement and also professional indemnity requirements. They have to submit annual accounts. If it is an agent, under the law, the legal liability will be on the company or the insurance company appointing it. But for brokers, they have to keep the interest of the clients in mind, and they are not appointed by any single insurance company. Therefore, they also have to submit accounts. Well, I'd like to know whether this happened in the past, that people act in the name of insurance companies and accept a lot of premium and then abscond, and the victim was not able to get any compensation. Did this happen? Are you talking about insurance company or intermediaries? I'm talking about intermediaries. Whether broker companies collapsed and wound up, yes, that happened. And some did accept premium without arranging for a policy. Well, maybe the policy has been arranged, but then the premium is still in the hands of the broker. However, since the contract will be signed directly between the insurance company and the insured, we would talk to the insurance company how that contract can continue, so the insured will not suffer any losses. As for the broker companies, as I said, they have to take out the professional indemnity. If it collapses, there will be indemnity that will take care of such situations. So I haven't seen situations in the past where the insured suffer losses. Well, I beg to differ from you, Commissioner. I have conducted business for decades, and I have seen this happen. I use ABC agent to take out insurance from different insurance companies. But the agent accepts my premium, and my check might be stating that the insurance company is the company to receive the check. But then some agents tell people to write their own names on the check so he can get the premium, and then he said he would submit the premium on my behalf to the insurance company. This way, the intermediary can pocket the money. Very often, I will not be able to get the policy from the insurance company because the company has not got the premium and no policies will be issued. Therefore, the insurance company will not have to pay compensation to me. And it will be up to the agent who should be sued for the fraud. That is what happens on the ground. Chairman, let me supplement. If the intermediary does accept your money, and if he pockets it, and as long as you have a receipt, and later on if this company collapses, we will look at the situation, and the broker companies would have to take out professional indemnity. This is really to cater to the situation of a collapse of the company, so that the insured will not suffer losses. This is exactly what you said just now. In other words, that the intermediary will get the money, but no policy has been issued. But then you will really have to have a proof of having paid, maybe in the form of a receipt. This did not happen very often in the past, but it did happen to one or two companies. This is what we did to make arrangements for the insured. No more questions? Can we continue? Page 224, 64 ZZB, procedural requirements for rejecting application or imposing or amending conditions, including the opportunity for the applicant to make representation. And the applicant can also appeal to the independent tribunal. From brackets 1 to 7, they give description to what I said, and they only deal with the application for different licenses. If there are no questions, we can go to 227, the new 64 ZZC, form of license. The detailed requirements are on page 228. I don't think I should go into the details because they are technical in nature. Page 229, 64 ZZD, duty to notify authority of change in partners, directors, or controllers. This should be done within a month. Failing that, there could be a fine at level 5. Page 230, the new 64 ZZE. Offense to provide false information in connection with application for license or approval. The penalty is a fine at level 5 and imprisonment for 6 months. Ms. Sitho? Sorry, I have to go back a little. Yes, please. Page 229. This is 64 C, bracket 6. Here it talks about travel insurance. It states here that to the agents, restricted scope travel business does not include an annual travel insurance policy. Where is this regulated then? Or did I miss anything? Page 229, bracket 6b. It states here that restricted scope travel business does not include effecting an annual travel insurance policy. Chairman? Yes? Let me explain. What it means here is that some travel agents, when they promote a group tour, it can also promote a travel insurance, which will be related to that group tour. In other words, it should not be selling or promoting an annual travel insurance policy. If the insured would like to do this, it can contact other intermediaries or on the internet. This is really about travel agencies. This regulates travel agents promoting travel insurance. Sorry, can I explain more? Please switch on the microphone, Ms. Sito. Sorry, I was not speaking into it. Can the DS explain more? Because here, you talk about restricted scope travel business. And this has to do with bracket 1D. And you are saying that if people have certain licenses, they can operate restricted scope travel business. If travel agents are only acting as the insurer for a one-time travel insurance policy, then it has to get a license. Well, yes. And then it will be subject to all the restrictions attending the issue of a license. Yes, correct. Now, if that's the case, if you apply the entire set of regulations on travel agents, why do you want to exclude annual travel insurance? If it is subject to so much regulation, why don't you just allow them to also promote annual travel insurance? I will ask the Commissioner to explain to you how this evolved. Chairman, there are some historical reasons about travel agents being restricted, because we'd like to encourage the public who are joining group tours or buying airlines. In other words, when they travel outside Hong Kong, they should take out travel insurance.
But if they have taken out insurance for the whole year, whether it's through an agent, insurance agent, or through the internet, I think as early as 2005 or 2006, there was the addition of the restricted scope travel business. A travel agent can obtain such a license, and the staff of the travel agent who has passed the exam on travel insurance is allowed to sell travel insurance. So they fall within the scope of an intermediary. But they have not taken other exams, so they cannot sell other insurance businesses. As for annual travel plans, they're more complicated, and therefore other intermediaries, insurance intermediaries, can sell the product. Now, whether it is to buy a package or buy a tour, then the travel agent can sell that insurance, and we want to encourage the travelers to take out travel insurance. Therefore, a decade or so ago, we introduced the restricted scope travel business. Well, that's something left over from history. Chairman, I'm not talking about travel insurance. Well, you can ask anything. Now, you need a fit and proper person. You require 1 month notice. Say, if there is a new director or a new person who has, there is a new director, should he comply with the fit and proper clause? Or should they notify you under AgendaI? Is it AgendaI? Do you need notification first before you approve that person is a fit and proper person, or the other way around? They have taken up, they notify you, and then you look into that. Now, the law requires the licensee to inform the authority within 1 month of the appointment of the director. And then the IIA will look at whether there are regulatory concerns. Do you have a pre-screening? Maybe you shouldn't call it pre-screening. Say, if I have a company, I appoint a certain person to be a director or a responsible person. The person doesn't want to have the application made to you and then later rejected. Can they ask you, say, I want to appoint this person, is he okay with you? And if he's not okay with you, then I get somebody else to do it. Now, with regard to RO, there is a pre-screening. Now, here it is about partners, directors, or controllers, or controlling shareholders. This is a notification requirement. Having notified the authority, the IIA can still consider whether the person is a fit and proper person. That's different from the RO. There are at least 2 ROs, right? Yes, indeed. 1 or 2? 1. Okay. That's RO is subject to a pre-screening, but this one doesn't. Right. Let us move on. 64 ZZE. Chairman, I still have one more question. Concerning the RO, there is a pre-screening mechanism. Some companies don't want to have their applicants rejected. So it's better for them to ask you to give an indication before they put in the application. Now, in considering whether a director or a controller is a fit and proper person, we've already explained that we consider the various factors outlined in the law. And there is no specific question of whether there is a record of being rejected. It seems that Mrs. Sin doesn't understand. Yes, I do. I understand it. Okay, that's good. Now, we've just covered 64 ZZE. We now turn to page 231. This division deals with inspection and investigation. The provisions give authority to the IIA to conduct inspections on the intermediaries and, if need be, conduct investigations. The relevant powers are similar to the inspection of intermediaries. If it's agreeable to the chairman, I propose not to repeat, but I will speak specifically on page 237, which is the inspection and investigation powers in relation to authorized institutions. 64. Yes. Sorry, speaker's not coming through. Missing Langsheng. I think you're going too fast. On page 231. Subclause 2. At any reasonable time, an inspector may enter any business premises. The definition of, or rather the meaning of business premises is very broad. Does it mean that any place that is being used by the intermediary to do business? Does it include back office, financial, IT, or other related activities? So any information can be, or rather any premises can be entered into. It can be entered by the inspector. Is it the case? Well, the definition of business premises include all premises being used to conduct business, including the example given by the member. But if it is a private residence, then the inspector will have to obtain a warrant from the magistracy. As for the business premises, I don't know whether the registered business premises are all commercial property. In the past, an intermediary may do his business at home. His registered business address is his residence. In the future, will the intermediaries not make use of their residence as a registered business premises? Well, an intermediary can be an individual. So the individual may use his residence as his business premises, and it falls within the definition of the law of business premises. But if the IIA is to enter into a residence, then a warrant from a magistracy has to be obtained. Ms. Ito, I know that the law is very thick. We shouldn't be hasty. Now you say the provisions are similar, and therefore we can jump over that bit. Now, the previous sections, the previous division is different from this division. Now, if it is a regulation on a insurance company, it may be stricter, and we understand that this is about regulating an intermediary, which can be a bit more lenient. But we still need to consider this carefully. Now, you say the provisions are similar, but the object, or rather the subjects to be regulated, are different. Is it appropriate to use the same procedures and powers to regulate an insurance company and the insurance intermediaries? They are two different subjects to be regulated. So while you adopt the same standard, you need to explain that to us. Well, it's okay to explain. If the member is of the view that we should look into the details of the powers, we are happy to do so. We can repeat that. To answer Ms. Ho's question. Well, Chairman, excuse me, I don't ask you to repeat it again. We want to know whether it is appropriate to regulate them with the same rules and procedures, though they are two different subjects of regulation. We want the regulatory body to have adequate inspection and investigation power to discharge its regulatory duties and functions. The inspection and investigation powers are similar to existing financial regulatory authorities. We have not added more powers, and in fact there are suitable checks and balances. At earlier meetings, we mentioned some checks and balances, and they include the person being inspected or investigated will be given a chance of representation when it comes to the stage of disciplinary action. And some actions have to be subject to a warrant from the magistracy. So these provisions are similar to other regulatory bodies. As for an insurance company, it is a business entity, but an intermediary can be a company or can be an individual. It can be a big company, even a multinational company. Therefore, such powers are applicable. The difference with regard to the intermediaries is that many banks are involved in insurance intermediary activities. A bank can be an insurance agent. Our policy is that the powers for frontline inspection and investigation with the approval of the CN Council can be authorized by the IIA and delegated to the HKMA to conduct the relevant inspection and investigation on banks which are dealing with the insurance intermediary business. This is to avoid duplication of efforts. As for delegating the authority to the HKMA to conduct inspection and investigation, some arrangements has to be made. Now that's in terms of policy, and I welcome the questions of members. Chairman, I also want to follow up the question asked by Ms. Leung Shing. Under 2A, we may not have heard, we may not have had a detailed discussion. Here, any business premises, it may not be related to insurance business. It may be a business which which involves the insurance intermediary, or is it just limited to any business premises in respect of insurance business? It is for premises related to insurance intermediary. We refer to regulated activities. Say if he is a school sponsor or the director of certain school sponsoring body, you will not check on that school. You only, even if it's an insurance intermediary, you only check on his office as far as insurance business is concerned, right? In fact, in the Blue Bill, C2036, the interpretation. Yes, we have the definition. 10, subclause 10, B. I mean, subclause A and B, the intermediary carries on business. Or, yes, Chairman, I read this, and therefore I ask for a clarification. If you work where you live, when they enter into the premises, this premises can be regarded as a business premises.
Well, the DS said that if they want to search a premises, they need a warrant. Yes, if it's just a premise, then you need a warrant. But if you live there and work there, in other words, it's your residence as well as your shop, then, Mr. Yu Si-wing, let's ask a question. At any reasonable time, who would decide what is reasonable time? And also, will you have to give notice? It doesn't say here whether notice will be given. Is it that you would send an inspector without notice? If that's the case, why don't you write it here? Chairman, under the law, reasonable time is what is in the view of a reasonable man. That is how the law looks at the word reasonable. As for whether it is a random check or a regular check, the law allows both. I don't know whether this is the usual practice. Is it that you would word similar provisions like this so the judge will know what to do? Because I don't want people to appeal on the basis of the text of the law. That is correct, Chairman. Talking about the word reasonable, we apply the reasonable man test. That is the criterion. Any other questions? If not, we'll continue. Let me explain page 233, 64ZZG and also 64ZZI. We said before that the inspector and investigator can ask anybody to make use of a statutory declaration to confirm what is already replied. But if someone says that the information concerned was not within the person's knowledge or possession, then the inspector can require the person to verify by way of a statutory declaration that the person did not comply with the requirement for that reason. 64ZZH, power to conduct investigation. And that is the authority can direct its staff or with the consent of the FS, other people to start investigation, including that the authority has reasonable grounds to believe that someone has breached the ordinance, and also when conducting regulated activities, that person is involved in fraud or deception. Ms. Sitho, sorry, the blue bill, ZZE. I cannot see the English because I did not take with me the second part. In bracket 3 of this one, the costs and expenses incurred by an investigator may be paid out of monies provided by the Legislative Council. I'm using the Chinese version. Are you saying that we should pay? But since I don't have the second part of the blue bill, I can't see the English. Let us explain. The same provision applies to insurance companies, and we also explained that before. If we come across very complex matters, we might need to send in experts to do the investigation. And then there may be the incurrence of extra monies, and we would have to ask for the Legislative Council to give us our funding support. But we don't expect this to happen very often. In fact, this is a very valid question because there are huge insurance companies and complex cases might happen. But as for intermediaries, there are also multinational companies, and they are of a very big scale. So I think that is a very good question. The English is more readable. You would ask us to approve of the funding request because you use the word provided by the Legislative Council. But in Chinese, it seems that we are going to pay out of our own account. Can you tidy up the Chinese, please, to make it more specific? Because if you only read the Chinese and as it is written, does that give you the feeling? Well, yes, it puts a lot of doubt in our mind, but the English is more easy to understand. Can we ask the legal advisor, is that the way how the Chinese has always been written? Thank you, Chairman. Speaker not coming through. Sorry, speaker not coming through. Please switch on the microphone. Now you can continue. Sorry, speaker not coming through. Sorry, speaker not coming through. Speaker not coming through to interpreters. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through to the interpreters. Thank you. In English, we use the words provided by the Legislative Council. Our understanding is that even when the Legislative Council approves funding, it doesn't mean that it is paying out of its own account. When the government applies for funding support, it applies for funding which will be approved by the Legislative Council, not for funding from the Legislative Council. So is this allowed? In other words, the Legislative Council can refuse to approve. Is that right? Of course, the political reality is that any funding request will be approved. But in theory, we can refuse to approve the funding. Well, the Chinese can give rise to a lot of interpretations. Why don't you change it to say you can apply to the Legislative Council for approval for funding support? Then it will make things so clear, and there will be the implication that we can refuse to approve it. Because it is written, it seems to say that we have certainty to approve it.
係啊，其實我哋41J 嗰度呢。
Under 41J, the Chinese is the same. Sorry, I might not have been at that meeting. 41J has been scrutinized. Can we be allowed to go back a little, Chairman? Indeed, if you change it to applying to the Legislative Council for funding support, then it makes things clearer. Can you not do something to the drafting of these clauses? Because that will be more akin to the legislative intent. Constitutionally, we have the power to disapprove of your funding, and we want that to be shown. Can you consider doing that? DOJ, thank you. Thank you for the suggestion. Well, Chairman and Ms. Ho, what you are proposing will solve the problem of monies that could be applied to the Council for support. But in the end, we have to make sure where the money will come from. And we are talking about the monies being approved by LegCo and be paid out of that approval. Because if we only say for approval by LegCo, then in the end we are still not clear enough as to where the monies will be coming from. Well, so you have to think about it. If I read the Chinese chairman, the first interpretation that came to my mind was, as I said it, it might not be the correct legal interpretation, but the layman will also have the same doubts as I do. I believe where you can make it clear and specific, you should do it. Chairman, I think you have the same interpretation, right? Okay, the DOJ should go back and think about this. Can we carry on? Page 237, as Mr. Zhang was explaining, this is about inspection and investigation powers for authorized institutions. We have said that this can be delegated to the Hong Kong MA to regulate frontline insurance activities done by banks. And at the same time, the SFC will reserve the inspection and investigation powers. Under 64 ZZJ, it is a savings clause. This is because when bank accounts are opened, the client will be signing a contract saying that the banks would have to keep information confidential. In this new 64 ZZJ, we have taken reference from other ordinances so that this savings clause will save or preserve the confidentiality responsibility of the banks unless it is satisfied that the disclosure is necessary for enforcing this ordinance. In other words, when the IA investigators go into a bank for a client's information, then the investigator will have to confirm with the banks in writing that the information is required for the enforcement of the ordinance. Sorry, Chairman, you are going too fast. Can I go back to page 235? And I don't know whether there have been similar provisions before this one, and I would apologize if I am asking an old question. Can I go to bracket 6 on 235? It says an investigator may require a person specified in subsection 7 to produce within the time, etc., and also to provide extra information. For example, D, to answer in writing, and also to provide further explanation. Would that be a kind of explanation on oath? And how about the record? Is it similar to the taking of a statement in a police station? Chairman. DS. 6B. It is not something done on oath. Very often, we may get information, but we would like to ask follow-up questions. Ms. Ho, I think you might have seen at other places of the bill the words on oath. That is why she is asking the question. Now, when we talk about taking something on oath, it is when someone who is inquired into may say he doesn't know of something and he doesn't have certain information. In that situation, the investigator can require that person to make an oath to say that indeed he doesn't have the information or he doesn't know about something. Chairman, however, if this is not done on oath, then the person who is investigated may not have the statutory duty to answer your questions. Well, here, this is a requirement. Does he have the right to remain silent? However, if he is obliged to answer you, where does it say here that you have an order or a warrant to direct this person to respond to an appointment so that at a time and place specified that this person should meet you? Where is that found in the bill? Who can answer the question? Chairman, on 235 bracket 5, it says, before first imposing such a requirement, the investigator must produce a copy of the direction or appointment to that person for inspection. And he will have to quote that it is because of a certain section in ICO that this person has been appointed the investigator. So the copy of the appointment must be produced before he can seek information under bracket 6. So does it mean that the direction or appointment already empowers the investigator, the enforcement power, so the person who is investigated must respond. However, he will not provide information on oath. Do you think that is sufficient? Ms. Wong has raised her hand. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. I can answer this question from Ms. Ho. I think Ms. Ho is concerned that if he doesn't comply with the directions and what would happen. Actually, on page 239 of the marked up copy in 64 ZZL, it talks about offences in relation to inspections or investigations. If the person does not comply with the investigator's requirements without reasonable excuse, then he would break the law.
There is a series of consequences in the provision. Okay? Okay, then please move on. 64 is ZZK. Page 238, the new 64 ZZK provides that if a person fails to comply with a requirement imposed by an inspector or investigator, then inspector or investigator may apply to the by originate summons to the court of first instance for inquiry into the failure. If there is no reasonable excuse, the person is ordered to comply with the requirement, and if non-compliance, then the person is regarded as contempt of court, guilty of contempt of court. Mr. Chen Kian-po, I want to ask about a higher level question concerning the whole procedure, such as business premises, remaining silent. Are there similar procedures under other regulatory regimes in Hong Kong? At present, no one will inspect an agent. In the future, the IIA can do. Of course, we have to prevent a crime. But can you explain to us whether your proposed powers will be stricter than similar regulatory bodies in terms of investigation and inspection? Chairman, yes. Concerning the powers for inspection and investigation, we have made reference to the SFO and MPFO, and also the anti-money laundering ordinance. The powers are similar. They are similar Are there added powers or are there less powers? No. Any further questions? Next, page 239. Ms. Hit-Ho, I want to go back to a previous question. You apply the same powers and procedures to a big company and a small broker. Is the logic the same? Is it logical? Well, some brokers are big companies, multinational companies. The law cannot make distinction between a big intermediary and a small intermediary who is operating from his home. Yes, the Commissioner, if I may add, with regard to the power of inspection and investigation, it is about procedures and also about the boundaries of such activities. Whether it is an insurance company or an intermediary, I think there is no difference. As for combating any money laundering law, in fact, we are already enforcing that. We do the same kind of inspection and investigation. We have the same powers. Whether it's an insurance company or an intermediary, we are working under the anti-money laundering ordinance. We look at the same type of documents. We also want the related persons to explain the documents. It's all the same. Any further questions? If not, we go on. Page 239, new 64 Citadel. The law draftsman has already explained that it is of provision for offences in relation to inspections and investigations. If a person has commits an offence, if the person without reasonable excuse fails to comply with a specific requirement imposed on the person commits an offence if the person with intent to defraud fails to comply with a specified requirement imposed on person. How can you prove intent when it comes to intent? With regard to an offence, I'm really scared. Do other regulatory laws adopt the same approach? That is, you also make it an offence if there is an intent. Well, in fact, the way of handling such offences is the same as other regulatory regimes. Local regulatory regimes. It is based on evidence in respect of the intent. It is for the prosecution to adduce evidence, and the court will make a decision. I think the standard of proof is very high. The prosecution has to prove beyond reasonable doubt. In exercising our power of inspection and investigation, we do face a very high threshold. In fact, it's a challenge for us. Well, your intent is in your brain. So what evidence can you get? Can you incriminate a person just with because of his intent? Well, under it said 64, it says that that's with intent to defraud. An intent, of course, is an activity in your conscience, in your consciousness. But we can see that from the action, which can be proved by evidence. It doesn't mean that there is no evidence. The standard of proof is high. I think the immediate question is whether there are provisions in the laws in relation to financial institutions. Say, if this is just, there are similar provisions in other laws regulating financial institutions. And we can ask you the precedents in which the intent has improved. Are there similar provisions in regulating financial institutions? Yes, Chairman, with regard to regulation of intermediaries under the MPFO, there are similar provisions. It is for the prosecution to prove the intent of the defense. Say, there is intent to murder, and they can still charge that. Intends to wound, intends to rob. Well, are you going to open up the brain in order to find that? It's difficult. But I tend to support the proposal here, but I find that there are difficulties of proving that. Say, for example, I intend to rob, but you really need to prepare for that. You need to buy firearms, or you need to make preparations, and there may be communication with the accomplice and things like that. Mr. Yu. Sorry, speaker is not coming through. His mic is not on. Fails to comply with specified requirement. Somebody must have issued the requirement, or the department must have issued the requirement. As for the person who issues this requirement, now he has issued a requirement, but you have not complied, then you have breached the law. Concerning the person or the department which issues the requirement, can there be an explanation, or do they give any explanation? Chairman, I don't understand the question. Say I issue an order. If you don't comply with the order, you have breached the law. Who issues the order? The department? Which individual? Is there a mechanism? Okay, I understand the question. Is there a mechanism? The IIA appoints inspectors to issue requirements, specified requirements. That is specified requirement to produce information in relation to the case. The IIA must have reasonable grounds to believe that the person possesses such information. The inspectors are usually employees of the IIA. They are appointed by the IIA. And in making such a requirement, the inspector will have to issue the authorization document. Can you state it in the law? It has already been stated in the law. They are inspectors. They go out to conduct inspections. Then the warrant. There is a warrant. In the law, we specify that there must be an appointment warrant, and it has to be shown. So that person, the IIA will be held responsible by the act of these inspectors. The IIA is responsible for investigation. The specified requirements in page 241 of the markup copy, 64 ZZF bracket 3, 64 ZZG bracket 1 and 2. These are the specified requirement. As for there must be a document of appointment or warrant of appointment, and it has to be shown. It has to be shown. Okay, we have reached 64 ZL. We've completed 64 ZZL. I think we are about time to end today's meeting. We will start with 64 ZZM at the next meeting. As for the date of next meeting, the 14th of April, 4:30 p.m. a Tuesday. And there will be another meeting after that. That will be in April, but the date will be notified. We may add one more meeting in April. So we may have 3 meetings in April, depending on the time slots available. The first meeting in April will be the 14th. So we definitely will have that meeting. Okay? Thank you very much.